Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the investment panel of the MIT A+B Symposium. Today, I'm very honored to have 4 excellent speakers to share their thoughts on investment in the energy field. My name is Lijie. I am the Managing Director of Dragon Gate Investment Partners. If you don't know the company, I can tell you we incubated the first NASDAQ blockchain company, and it went public in 2017, and the stock price went from $5 to $143 within 4 days. So we created $5 billion within a very short period of time. I've been working in the investment field for more than 10 years, but before, I have 4 degrees in 4 different disciplines. I have a law degree, a journalism degree, and a Master of Science in Natural Resource Management and the MBA. So this different discipline education generated the foundation of my curiosity to participate in this excellent conference. And I spent 3 years in the boreal forest in Alaska. So I cut 4 trees every day, dig 2 soil pits, measure the temperature by myself. I have the first-hand experience on the global warming, and since then, I paid much attention to the energy field. Today, we are here to discuss the investment path from traditional energy industry to new energy industry. I have the 4th speaker, Ralph Hornblower. If you can wave, people will recognize you. And Dr. Daly, and Monty Simus, and Michael Daly, and me. And all my speakers have a great experience in the energy field, and some of them are in both areas, in traditional energy and new energy. I want to start with, first of all, I want to give you a little bit personal remark about each of the panelists, so you can actually recognize the person. Ray, I met Ray at IPO process of a company called Hexin, and Ray was one of the investors, and that's how I started to know about Ray. He told me a lot of interesting stories. The one that I remember the most is he runs a family office for six generations, and he's also related to President Roosevelt in many, many generations ago. And Ray introduced Michael to me, and Michael has extensive experience in the venture capital field, and he invested in a lot of interesting projects. And some of them are so secret, and so they don't want us to release and public on media. And I know Monty through a mutual friend, Li Fengzhang, and I just learned Monty did a lot of interesting work in Afghanistan, and we look forward for you to share about those stories. And Dr. Daly is the host of this conference. We are very honorable to be here to attend this conference. And because my background is more from finance, I want to give you a little bit sense of why the capital are flowing into the energy industry and where the money is really going, and what would be the future like, and maybe a little bit tip about how you can think about the investment field. I have to make a disclaimer that we don't make any investment recommendations. Please pay attention to any of the risks in the investment field and make your own judgment. I want to start with a very simple question. So when we talk about the renewable energy, I am always confused why the solar is a renewable energy and the fossil fuel is not. Because we know the fossil fuel can reproduce, but the solar is a depleting energy. I will start from any of you.
It's confusing to all of us. The renewable aspect of it is that you're not depleting a resource in the ground. But essentially with solar you're just depleting the solar cell. A solar cell has a useful life, and additionally, it depletes over a period maybe 5 to 10 years. And so you have to replace them. So essentially, it's renewable, but it still has the same characteristics as regular petrol. In what we are doing, we're looking into hydrogen as a renewable source because it's readily available. And in our process, we produce oxygen, and we've solved the NO2 problem, right? Anybody?
So I think in the third plenary talk, we have heard of solar to liquid fuel, so isopropanol. And so I think the key word is the fossil. So if we don't burn the fossil, then that's renewable. So using chemical fuel is great because that gives us seasonal storage, but we shouldn't have more of the fossil being burned and released into the atmosphere.
I have a slightly different take on this. We've invested in hydropower, and we're looking very carefully at wind power, but primarily in very young markets, so developing countries. I always tell people that the single most important renewable resource in these countries is a human capital, and without electricity or electrification, they're not going to be able to sort of continue to evolve and develop. So I would argue the most important sort of renewable resource in these countries is not the ones coming from the sky, wind, or water, but it's actually the people that are being served by it.
And I'll finish by all my friends who've worked in the solar industry no longer have jobs there.
Including my attorney.
Well, now you feel a little bit of heat already. So where would the money go? It will go to the traditional energy field, or it will go to the new energy field. And we hear there are a lot of great things about the new energy. The cost has been significantly reduced, and the efficiency has been significantly increased. And it's a very fast-growing industry. But we heard from Wall Street Journal, Warren Buffett just decided to put his $10 billion cash into the traditional energy field. What happened there? I want to hear the insight from our experts.
So traditionally, the green energy was not a Wall Street favorite because of high risk, and anything to do with energy usually involve heavy capital investment. And so I think just like the plenary speaker talked about, so this does need collective action, I think political action in different countries to nurture and support. Having said that, the price of solar has really become very competitive. So it actually is so competitive that sometimes it drives electricity price to negative in Germany, for example. But the problem is due to the lack of energy storage that actually disrupt the market rather than actually helping. And that actually doesn't improve the carbon intensity of Germany. So it actually, without energy storage, it's more like a nuisance. So recently there has been claims, for example, in China that battery energy storage start to make profitable on the market, and so that is, I think, something to watch out for.
So we've watched as a project developer and investor, we've watched sort of the big players in what you'd call the infrastructure space, the General Electrics and Siemens of the world. You know, they're severely, their performance at their gas turbine or their power generation equipment divisions has been abysmal, actually, for the last few years. But despite that, we're quite buoyed by the what I'll call traditional fuel source. In our case, we look actively at natural gas. With the efficiencies of these equipment, it may not be sort of as attractive or alluring or an interesting media story as solar, but in terms of grid level capacity and output, we're really quite pleased with sort of the efficiency which these divisions have been performing at.
Why don't you continue?
So I'll give some background first, and I'll restate the question. Why are they going back into traditional investment into petroleum or crude or other forms of natural gas? So roughly in 2007 and 2008, I wrote a report and gave it to a Saudi Arabian official. The title of the report was How to Make $100 a Barrel of Oil When the Price of Oil is at $40 or $48 a barrel. In there, I structured a concept that if you were to continue to pump the maximum amount of oil that you could, that you would drive the price down, which is common, and then create a situation where your competitors could not compete with you. During that same time, the Rockefellers essentially sold all their oil stocks. They got out of the business. They had an insight that the Saudi Arabian government and OPEC would start focusing on volume and not price. Additionally, they were structuring it so that in the future they could control their borders with Iran and Russia. And what they were looking at was, how do we put them out of business so that they don't attack us? Oil or traditional energy is a very political item. And so they went about structuring and pumping as much oil into the marketplace to suppress the price of oil just above the price of the Bachman Shale, which is roughly $48 a barrel. Additionally, they were trying to control shipping, all right, which they almost did in the United States, where they were trying to control certain ports. The idea was to go out, pump up as much oil as possible, and then start substituting crude oil for final port of destination refined products, and then offer those products at near the crude price so that they can maintain an oligopoly or a monopoly in the marketplace. Obviously, at that time, the rest of the investors came out of the market. All right, it's had great success for Saudi Arabia, but with that oil going into the market, it's created progress, more jobs, more productivity, and it's just starting. So therefore, because of that increased productivity of the oil being cheaper, there's now going to be a higher demand in 6 years. It takes roughly 6 years to make a refinery. So our dear friend Warren Buffett is looking down the road saying, where is the money going to be coming in a great economy? It's going to be coming from oil, traditional oil. Now, if oil is suppressed low enough, it really stymies all the alternative types of energy out there, solar, wind, and so on, because of the cost differential. Like, I think Stephen was his name. He said if you put a straw into the ground and you pull oil out, the Saudis pull that out about $2 a barrel. With social services, that's $22 a barrel. The rest, probably about 20% is cost of delivering. The rest is profit. But if you add refined product on top of that, they can make $100 a barrel. So several of the key investors are looking down the road and saying, hey, wait a minute, there'll be a big profit in 6 years. How do I get in on that? I start now building capacity. I hope that answers your question, but that's some of the things.
I just would like to say that in the spirit of this conference, I hope those refined products are advanced materials and chemicals and not for burning. That's
So when I wrote the report over 8 years ago, I included in my 275 contracts to China and the rest of the world the capability to substitute traditional oil products for other ones. So I have the right to substitute other products. So we may get there with hydrogen and other forms of fuel.
Okay. I read a news report of probably 2 weeks ago. Have anybody here heard a place called Dead Horse in Alaska? One? Okay. It's the very, very far north. I wouldn't call it a city. It's just a location. There is an oil refinery. You have to wear sunglasses to enter with a special pass. I studied the permafrost in that area. So I used a drill to put one meter down to the earth to observe the permafrost behavior. So I had some impression about that horse. That's how I noticed this news. The news said the temperature, the average temperature this year is 20 degrees higher than the average in the past many, many decades. That's a very surprising news to me. It echoes people's concern about the global warming. And to me, my reaction on that is the permafrost I studied is probably melting. Alaska is a very sensitive area for global warming. And when the permafrost is melting this year, there might be flood. And actually, you can see the flood in the country. And also, it changed the continent land, and there may be earthquake. And because if you search earthquake, you will see there are much more earthquake this year than other time. So when we talk about energy, it's probably not only about the cost and the return, it's about concerns of people's life. So here, when we talk about different opinions, of course, there are panelists are from different perspectives. I like to know how you entered into this industry, what motivates you for your research and analysis for your investment, and based on that background, what do you see, what would happen in the future? What's the demand and the supply is like? Okay, who wants to start?
So I'm not a financier, and I guess I do invest in human capital. So I just would like to say that carbon dioxide is not only important pollutant, so there are many other pollutants, including microplastics. And it's, like I said, well documented that human activities have led to mass extinctions of animals and plants. And so I think this is the climate. So I don't necessarily call it global warming, but there's definitely climate change, human-induced. And the reason is, if you look at the equations that governs the climate, it has to do with the water temperature, has to do with the airflow. It's a very complex set of equations, which actually solving those equations and getting enough data is not easy. So it is not easy to quantitatively make very precise predictions. But the fact that we are doubling the CO2 in the atmosphere is like throwing a wrench into a very finely tuned machine. And you're going to get all kinds of unexpected outcome. And pretty quickly, I think if we don't do anything in 20 years, we're going to see severe consequences on land and in ocean, by the mid-century. So this is sort of what motivates me, which is I work on energy materials, and I sincerely hope we can have enough of a collective will to tackle, if not completely solve, some of these problems.
So we look at markets, again, that are very young or very have big populations that don't have grid access or access to electricity in general. And if you look at how those people are solving the problem currently, often they are burning some of the dirtiest fuel. They have their own small cook stoves. They have very dirty, high-emitting, coal-fired little furnaces in their homes. And so our approach has always been to invest in sort of new business models to take these markets to provide electricity to more people in a much more efficient manner than at that individual level. So I guess I'm suggesting that, yes, there may be cleaner ways than burning natural gas. We're quite pleased with the performance at natural gas. But the alternative, again, in these very young places, actually might be considerably worse.
I spent the first 5 years of my career as a lawyer at the Justice Department enforcing the Civil Rights Act and finding out who killed those 4 girls in Birmingham. So I am kind of a bleeding heart. I'm here to save the planet. And the guy to my right, I'm telling you, is closest to saving it. I spent about 10 years looking at converting all sorts of fossil fuel to gas. And I think it's Florida State and Power that does natural gas by night and solar by day. I don't know why more state power industries haven't done that, because you really do reduce the carbon output by 90% in those models. And now, right now, we're generating a lot of income through selling LPG and converting LPG in the third world, a UN program. The home cooking is a huge producer of carbon and soot, and it's killing people, like 5,000 a day in Latin America and in Africa, South Asia. So the prospect of moving as much of the fossil fuel world into natural gas and then taking that natural gas and moving it into hydrogen, I think is the most promising, in my 20 years in this business, it's the most promising development. And this guy has been really quite amazing. He's educated over 27 years, 2,100 venture capitalists and entrepreneurs, and stayed in touch with them and developed a number of truly disruptive technologies. So I'll send it to you here.
Hope I can live up to that. So I have several motives that brought me in here, some accidental, some intentional, and some as a burden. So I'll step back a little bit. So in 1987, I had the great fortune of working for a lady, Carol Swick. She's a landscape architect. You might know her boss, that was Lee Koppelman. And so his boss was Robert Moses. And as you know, Robert Moses built the highway system and essentially created the pollution here by having the cars drive all over the United States. But back then, I learned ArcInfo, a mapping technology, and I was very fascinated with the data, economic data and pollution data. We mapped the entire state of New York. And at that time, I recognized that there was a big pollution problem. And I think the publication was a 201 non-source pollution book or something. I forget exactly the name. You got to remember, that's 87. I think I was a lot younger at that time. I had hair, and I was young. That never left my mind. I've been using that application for venture after venture after venture. Many of my students in the venture class had anti-pollution devices, you name it, over 4,000 students. So that was one thing that stuck in the back of my head. And then one day, my foundation invested in a device for a car that suppresses 97% of the pollution that comes out of the back of it. I didn't know anything about it. It was roughly 2003, 2004. The company failed. The entrepreneur running it didn't have a market for it. We were fighting with them over a period of time, and then finally, in November of last year, we grabbed it. And we married it up to our technology. And the idea I've been selling to the Saudis, well, they kind of asked me for it, and the Chinese, I'm doing work in China and Saudi Arabia, is that we could suppress a lot of the pollution, all right? But to do that, you cannot expect someone to pay more than what they're currently paying or lose their sunk cost in their car, all right, or their truck. So we devised a device that you could plug into your old car, and it produces 50 to 100 miles to the gallon. We have better results with that, much, much higher. We will be filing for that patent in all the major countries. We had several tests recently. And so I accidentally fell into this because I was looking at this device and it wasn't performing well. And then we found another device and we married them. So that's how I kind of got into this, looking to save air. In China, I don't know if I said this already, I'm sorry, I didn't have sleep for the last 3 days and I just drove up here from New York. In China, 4,750 people die a day from air pollution. Essentially, China is suffocating. All right. Additionally, they only have 32% drinkable water. And after every economic development period or industrial revolution, there is pollution left behind because of the devices we use to make value. When we focused on this device and what we were doing, we focused on, can we have economic development without pollution? And many of the things we saw today downstairs assure me that we can. And what we're doing right now is trying to get to countries to build infrastructure so that we have devices and fuel, the chicken and the egg. And we have done it in about 5 countries. And when we're moving ahead with this, the objective is to have economic development at no additional cost for switching that doesn't lose your sunk cost in your current vehicle, and then additionally gives you additional value. So we would be selling the fuel for $1.20 a gallon, and they could essentially drive a whole month with that or go deliver things with that. We have several countries we're working with, and that's what gave me the inspiration to do this venture and to even come here. We learned a lot today. We have some of the technology they have downstairs. We have that also. But the difference is we're putting it in a practical sense so we can make money and return money to the country we're working with in the form of tax dollars. But that may be getting a little bit off the focus. Essentially, we had a device. The entrepreneur couldn't get into the marketplace. I have contracts for about 97 million cars in China to put them on there. All right, let's hope that they go through with it with their current tax. We spoke with Larry Kudlow. We hope that they would have this thing concluded this month so we can go in there and start working on it. We're working with Pakistan, Oman, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia. So perhaps other entrepreneurs doing things would also contribute to this to clean up the air and the water. But I want to state one other thing. You may use more carbon in making an electric car, but at the end of its useful life, you have to bury that battery somewhere or reuse it. So it goes from the air to the water into us. And that aspect of it has to be stopped soon. I don't care what they say on the TV about, we'll die in 12 years. I don't think that's possible, but we do have a chance to change it because this is the first time where expectation can be met with technology and people believe in it. And if they believe in it, they'll transfer their dollars into the product that you offer and contribute to saving ourselves. So that's how I got here. I hope that.
And our panelists mentioned a lot of different geographic regions. And actually, if you grow up at different places, you may have different perspective about energy. I was born in the geographic center of China called Lanzhou. It's in the Gansu province. It's a Gobi Desert area. It's a Greenland in the Gobi Desert area. So when I grow up, water is a very essential resource. And we have to be very careful about using water. But when I went to Alaska for my Master of Science degree, I noticed that when people when they leave the building, they left the lights on because they want to appear that there are people, so there is no people to enter and steal things. So they don't concern about energy that much. And I also benefit from the Alaska Permanent Fund because when I graduate, they support Alaska students to do asset management all over the world. And their money is coming from oil. So I got an opportunity to become an analyst working in a hedge fund in London. We had 34 people managing $6 billion. And when I actually managed money, I realized, when you consider investment, when you consider capital, you can invest to kill or invest to live. And when we talk about energy, I am so fascinated that our experts are working on different regions in the world. And I want them to expand their story a little bit, tell us what's different region, what people in different region see the energy investment and what could potentially happen considering we are in so many conflicts at a current moment. Okay?
Since we haven't filed a patent here, I get nervous when I tell you what I really think. This fellow here has the potential of rolling out, can I say it? 890 million cars spewing oxygen within years. I don't think anyone has studied. He went to the New Jersey, New York, and the Connecticut Department of Motor Vehicles for the carbon testing. They couldn't find, they're pulling their hair out. Where the hell is the carbon? No carbon. So he sticks a little funnel and sucks in the exhaust for about a minute and a half.
Right.
And the,
if you check advertisement money, you have to disclose
Yeah,
that.
don't do that.
okay, but the point is, we really could flip climate change if this thing were rolled out. And unfortunately, it has to be rolled out in nations that can do it on a huge, widespread basis, and those tend to be the autocratic nations. But it can be done, and it can be done pretty rapidly. You've also informed all the important people in Detroit, so we can do it, but I have expectations that some other countries will beat us to it.
So, Mr. Yu, on the geographic focus, so I've spent a lot of time in the Middle East, Central Asia, and Africa. And we've chosen to invest in what we think is a project structuring and investment model that can deliver returns in these markets, not only financial returns, but sort of social returns, as I said, to electrify nations and bring people into sort of the powered world much more quickly. These are special. I mean, every market has challenges. These are very particular challenges. Oftentimes, these countries are very unsettled, dynamic. Grid is not available. Grid can't reach. Our grid is instable or unstable. We're very active in a country of Afghanistan, which is extraordinarily challenging just from a security perspective. But we find great appeal in these markets because the impact. If we deliver sort of impact investing, not only through financial basis, but just in sort of changing people's lives. So that's why we find it appealing, and that's why we spend a lot of time thinking hard about this model.
So China and the US are the leading two polluters, right? So, and I think to lead the world, these two countries have to lead by example. So I've visited the Vogtle nuclear power plant construction. It's a very interesting experience in Georgia. And in terms of investment, I think China is the biggest investor in nuclear energy. I think there are like 20-some power plants under construction. But then even more invested in wind and solar. So I think I think this is where some government intervention and collective action is actually making sense from a climate change and energy transition perspective. I think even though we talk about individuals and making profits, I do think this has to there has to be a framework where people can make money under certain government policies. I don't think that just based on the free capitalist system we can fight pollution, which is these externalities that you inject into the environment. So I think the breakdown of the model is actually catching up with us.
I just wanted to add, I had an additional thought. So you actually see the energy project being a tool or a projection of, in some cases, foreign policy. So in Central Asia, we see China very active throughout the countries to the north, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Tajikistan. There's 4 very large natural gas pipelines that flow from Turkmenistan back to Western China, producing electricity. It's converted into electrons in China. Afghanistan is likely to be the same. And so I think in addition to sort of markets in and of themselves from a geographic perspective, the world of energy has sort of a bit of a global perspective for very large countries, producing countries, and countries that maybe have energy shortages in their own backyard that they're bringing from elsewhere.
Ray, I want to ask a very specific question to your expertise, since you were a lawyer at the Justice Department. When we talk about energy policies, considering the culture difference and also the disruptive technology may change the traditional format, what's your view on the legal perspective of setting up the policies to encourage innovative ideas and hopefully upgrade the infrastructures?
You know, the Justice Department is very compartmented. I was in civil rights and then in white collar crime, and I suppose if they pushed harder on some white collar initiatives, but the antitrust does not seem to be an area that's that fully enforced, and I don't think it would be the Justice Department that would be a major regulator in this field.
Who would it be? What would be the best approach of having the policymakers to talk to each other so they kind of have a consensus of what it would be like in the future?
Let me see if the other lawyer wants to weigh in.
Energy is such a strategic asset. Henry Kissinger in 1972 locked up the shale oil with the deal with the Saudis. And the reason he did that is that they wanted to create peace in the Middle East. So, the oil is such a big part of politics that you can't separate them. However, you can use them very shrewdly in designing policy and implementing it so that you can create good commerce around the fuel or the petroleum or the energy, at the same time as suppressing war, because whenever you see good commerce, you don't see war. All right, so I would say that the Commerce Department, the State Department, as we all know, several of the State Department officials are heavily involved or were heavily involved in the petroleum and the energy business. But I think what we should be doing is, on a grassroots level, going to every politician we know, because energy affects everyone everywhere, and really coming up with our own treaty with our own government and telling them, look, we want clean air, we want clean water, everybody wants it, but we also want to be diligent in our job of negotiating treaties with other countries and working out the energy issue. All right, because right now, in places like I've been to Nigeria. I don't know how many people have been to Nigeria. So the three major things in the press there are oil, cell phone, who killed who for those items. Yeah, every day. And then second, because of the Nigerians, the way they handle the oil business, which is unlike the way the Saudis handle it in other countries, you have people going along the oil pipeline, drilling holes in the pipeline to get oil and setting themselves on fire. I was there in 2007 for 29 days, and every day their policies and their procedures impacted their people on that level, on the food level, on the income level, on every level you can imagine. We are two things in the world. We are maritime culture, and we're oil-driven. Oil is the thing that drives commerce. It's the cheapest, the most condensed fuel source that there is. However, over a period of time, if we're diligent, we can come off the carbons and make this place much, much better. Right? So I think, I'll restate it again, every single politician should understand in America what the issue of oil is, globally and independently, locally. Right? That's what
And another thing, everything I've said to date depends on some strong intellectual property protection, and we just can't give away these secrets. Now, you've already estimated that your device is going to be reverse engineered, so we're already, but we do have to, and that's why these tariff negotiations are important.
So yeah, that piece of it is extremely important to us. We're waiting right now for a change in the U.S. policy with China. I speak with the Chinese on a regular basis. The idea is that our intellectual property, like their intellectual property, should be protected on both sides. And there are several stipulations in the new trade agreement that will assure us that that's protected. I mean, we spent $80 million on this and an additional $320 million. All right, so we're expecting a return from that. but we're not making it excessive so that people cannot afford it, all right? In fact, when we do this with our energy policy to clean the air, because our device cleans the air and then additionally makes oxygen. So if there's carbon in the air, it pulls it in and packages it up. So it's like a vacuum cleaner and an energy source that creates oxygen. But the thing is, we need protection of this so that we can roll it out inexpensively and everybody can have it. Because, you know, the pollution I make today, someone else is breathing in right next to me. Oh, sorry.
I actually hear two sets of voices. One is what should it be, and the other is what they are. Right now, I want to go back to what we should be. Ray mentioned the antitrust law are not enforced in the energy sector, but energy is affecting everybody in the world. And I believe that the scholars at MIT and other universities, when they try to advocate for new energy, considering the world pollution is to improve the quality of life and better living, and but to connect the two, probably there's something need to be done, that we need to resolve the immediate conflict. We need to consider what would be the most valuable asset. We also need to balance the long-term quality of life and the long-term return for the next generation and the generation. So I want to hear your opinion about what you think could be the dots that connect the two voices, because I know some of you have been in both areas in the new energy sector and also participate the traditional oil industry. So let us know your thoughts. Okay?
You know, we need much more of you guys in main energy, because there's always a place for all those major companies are looking for how they're going to make money in 20 or 30 years without poisoning their children. And so what I see is Wall Street is much too compartmented. We don't see enough scientists. I hope the energy venture capital firms are you should push that they interview here and that you consider working for them, because you could make a huge difference. They have got to change. And the thing about fossil fuels, there's 200 other uses besides putting them in vehicles and trucks. And it's in their interest to start making the move toward a green planet. And they, in fact, this hydrogen can easily be made by a tweaked refinery, LPG or LNG refinery. So it's not that different, and it can make a huge difference. But there got to be, everyone I've met on Wall Street, I'm sorry, not one of them has your scientific IQ, I can guarantee you. It's a fact, and that should change.
Yeah, so frankly, I think a lot of the problems are systemic and political in nature. So I think one aspect in the A plus B is really political action. I think I would advocate for economic, social, technological, but also political action in getting our acts together and connect what we have now, the system that we have now, with the system that we should have.
May I ask, are there any questions from you to us right now? Because I'm trying to think, who here is in the business, the petroleum business or energy business? 1, 2, 3, 4. Who would like to get into it? There we go, okay. And then the question, you know, are we addressing your interests right now? Because I'm trying to understand, is this something we're missing in the conversation? It seems that you have a diverse background, right? We have a heavy Asian population in here, a lot of engineers, I can tell, right? And is there something that's happening in the industry that you would like to ask us? Is that possible? No? Okay, there we go. Yes.
There's a question there.
So as a scientist working in the petroleum industry and attempting to convince my employer to do what you suggested, that we should think about 20 years in the future and coming up with products that don't poison the air. Having some success getting my company's leadership to buy into that line of thinking, but not as much as I would like. What advice can you give me to get the other leaders in my company on board with this way of thinking?
Wow. So, do we work with them already? No. My suggestion, what I did was I looked at the financing of it, and I said two things. It cannot harm our current position and only enhance our current position. All right? Once we get that out of the way, the next piece of it, where will we be 1 year, 2 years, 3 years down the road? And if you can paint that picture properly, they'll come in. We went out for a meeting the other night, and without offering it, I essentially got a written offer for $1 billion for the device. We know it's much, much larger, but what we told them where we are right now, we explained it in their terms, and they picked up on it right away. Within about 45 minutes, they had a written offer in front of me. It was a Chinese company, but the reason why the Chinese are interested is because the two major problems, the air and the water, and the third one is the ambulance system there, the fire system. But they're a country that is progressive in an adaptation of new technology to solve problems now. They're motivated, so we went to them, all right? So try to figure out the motive and how you can get them motivated, and they'll come right away because shareholders are looking for this. The shareholders you have today probably come out of the 60s, right? You know, just like me, kind of. I'm a little bit younger, but the thing is they're looking to make a change, all right? So what you're looking for is looking for you. You just have to kind of put it out there. Some of the technology I saw down there today was extraordinary, and I already made market applications for it. And we'll look around for a host. What we do is we look at the problem and then find the country that has that problem. And they have low red tape, because if I brought my device here, I'll be in the back office for the rest of my life, you know. But if I bring it to another country that has a need, like India, Africa, China, the Middle East, they go for it right away. They have no choice. They have to. So try to get in the position of where they have no choice but to adopt, and you'll get it right away. Like, you know, Machiavelli said in The Prince, there's nothing more difficult than change, except when they're freaking motivated. They go right away. Does that help? Okay.
I saw another hand. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm going to throw to some extent a question back at you, and it's going to be, you mentioned that there are not that many scientists at Wall Street. And from my interactions with people who were in the financing, one of the things that I'm working in solar, so I've been in that business for a while. And we've seen that the market, for example, is to some extent very conservative, and it's very difficult to convince people of new ideas. So as scientists, what can we do in talking to Wall Street? What can we give you as in terms of information, in terms of idea? How should we even talk about this to get these ideas where they need to be?
Did something. This gentleman's changing the world. He's changing the world. My dear friend Ray is. I am attempting to do it. It's hard. It's not easy. But one day you wake up and they'll be at your doorstep saying, why didn't we do this earlier? If you have something today, this is the greatest time in history, because change is around us. Technology is available, and it's very inexpensive to get in there. You just need the push. Put together a 10-page business plan and go hunt down venture capitalists. When I wanted to go in to meet with the head of the UAE, right, I went after their private office every time I could. I wouldn't leave the guy alone. So then finally he raised up in the meeting when I was presenting. He says, okay, I'll do it with you. That's how it went. I was relentless in it. Don't give up, because when you give up, the great stuff you have in your head will never be out here. And it's got to be out here because we have so many problems. Is that?
Well, I mean, in many ways, we shouldn't be here because we haven't tied up this stuff. But Michael will have a huge success. It'll be on the front pages somewhere. And then you need to pitch that to your company and follow up with all new developments. Hopefully there'll be a newsletter in this area. And it is through lobbying, you know, with winning projects, which I think is going to happen rather quickly.
So I bet in this room, if you guys network, you can find all the resources right in this room to do whatever you want. I know Ray and myself, we help many, many people all the time. We're very thankful for her invite, all right? The idea is, you know, project it out there and go after it. This is a great conference because I saw so many things downstairs that can be monetized. Just like this, it's just like what? Yeah, monetize. Yeah, the thing is, you have everything. You come from a great background. This institution is phenomenal. I mean, wow.
I would really push the institutional leaders of MIT to start making more of an impact on Wall Street. The truth is, the reason I didn't set foot, even though my family's been in the business since 1881, I'm fifth, my son's sixth generation, I won't go near those big houses, don't get me in trouble, guys, because they're pushing junk, they're pushing collateralized mortgages, and they're pushing it out to 90% of 20,000 brokers. You guys could say there are better things to package and market to the public, much better things, but you've got to be there, and there are people there. And by the way, all the Middle East institutions are also based in New York, and it's the Google search away. But 4 or 5 of you guys, maybe of diverse backgrounds, go in there, and then go in 2 months later, and then 2 months later, and you watch. And I might be able to help you. So it's shocking how Wall Street has not addressed this issue to date. And it's going to take the MITs and the Caltechs to turn it around. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, I'd add to what Michael said, and I'd say that you have to position it as a story of scale, right? It's a story, the investment community can figure out the market scale, but they might not figure out the technology scale. So you need to have a solution or present your solution in the context that you have a legitimate path to scale, but that there's a big opportunity for that innovation, that piece of technology, that new inspiration to reach a lot of people. So I think, you know, sometimes entrepreneurs or people in the science world, they get very focused on sort of the elegance of their particular solution. But again, we're trying to change many things in this world, so project a story or a narrative around scale.
I think everyone has to do their part. And I study materials and actually mechanical properties, and the system has friction. So it doesn't move for a long time. But I think once there is enough people that's motivated and pushing and be persistent, and that at a certain point you are over the threshold and the system can move very rapidly. So one example is mobilization in wars. So you can do amazing stuff just in 2 years, 2 to 4 years. So we have 20 years. And I think that's the motivation for this conference. The A stands for action. And I think everybody has to take action on their part. So even if you fail convincing your boss to do something, but it's going to leave an impression. I think if enough people tried, at a certain point, the system, I believe, can overcome this sort of static friction and really get into motion.
Change is happening every generation. And in the past, actually 10 years ago, I was a CFO at a solar company. And at that time, the solar company, their efficiency is like 30%. Right now, it's much higher. And I just read a story that in Sweden, they actually have the automatic solar system in individual house, so you don't have to rely on huge infrastructure. You can live to wherever you want by providing energy yourself. That actually release a lot of the burden and give you more freedom if you think that way. So I think the breakthrough technology really changed what's happening now. And on Wall Street, we have a saying, the past performance doesn't represent the future, right? Even if you think what's happening now generate a strong trend, it doesn't mean this trend will continue for the next 10 years or may not continue for the next 20 years. And it really depends on what people are thinking and how do you form a consensus and how do you implement your ideas. That's what's really powerful. I want to go a little bit broader because we live in a conflicting world. I am curious that, if for the traditional energy or the new energy, how would the current political actions impact our lives? Would they have a war, or how would that happen, affect the oil industry? And I know the Brent oil price was 70. It's a little bit higher than a few months ago. It was 40 before. And the oil price is already increasing. Should people invest in oil? Would they keep it up, or would they go down? Because you see a lot of different conflicting directions, actions, and that really changed people's judgment.
Yeah. So Warren Buffett, he has good insight,
All right.
good knowledge, good network, also good research. So my recommendation follows a recommendation I made a few years ago to a very good friend. He invested against Wall Street and lost a large amount of money. Look at the big boys like Warren Buffett, the Rockefellers, and other investors. And then the Saudis, they're the largest producers of oil in the world, essentially outside of the United States, but in traditional oil. Watch what they're doing. What they're going to be doing is raising the price of oil long enough to take profit to pay for their social programs and to pay for the cleaning of their equipment, which I understand there'll be some type of shutdown coming. It was published in the paper a few days ago. They're going to raise and lower oil prices to meet their political needs and to control the supply of oil and the price of oil. I would not, unless you have very, very deep pockets, invest in that. Where I would invest, though, is in the innovation surrounding the industry and working with the big boys that have the big pockets, right? The companies that you work for, or even the competitors that are interested in an innovation you can bring, right? Whether it's biofuels, right? Hydrogen, solar, wind, whatever, thermo, wave technology. One of my employees from a venture a few years ago now works for President Xi doing wave technology to create energy. So there's an extraordinary amount of profit and revenue and innovation to be made, supplementing where the market's going. So I would look at that as an opportunity.
And this very modest guy to my right is also funding, getting the desert to bloom. I want you to talk a little bit about some of your related, just a little bit. I know it's not, it is energy because, because a lot of this fossil fuel can be used to get the desert bloom.
Right. So in some of the countries, what we're doing is going after deep water to come in and to make refined products. Additionally, desalinization to farm crops, and from the refinery making petrochemicals for fertilizer. We additionally have a polymer that will absorb up to 400 times its weight in water and stay around the plant so they can grow corn in the desert. But that's a product that comes out of the future refineries that we're building them now. But we went into the refinery and say, what other things could we make out of the old refineries that are going to be shut down in this new market? Right? Nigeria is getting out of that business, and several other countries. In Aruba, they have a refineries that shut down there because Venezuela is not bringing the oil in there anymore. They have a problem down there. We're looking at it and saying we can do other things with that refinery. All right. So the thing we're looking at in some of these countries is we want to give them clean energy, as clean as possible or cleaner, and then use the current technology you have in place to create other opportunities in petrochemicals. All right. And it's a gold mine right now because everybody on Wall Street's shying away because they. There we go. Sorry about that. All right. And it's an opportunity to really make a mark.
I have a question to Monty, because when I hear about the Afghanistan story, I was very curious 17 years ago when you started as a telecom company, setting up the infrastructure in a conflicting area. And over the years, a lot of things must be happening, and you have to deal with the potential noises, right? Interference and from government, from the people, from culture, many different. So how do you maintain a sustainable infrastructure development, and how do you communicate with the investment world that you may generate a return long way?
So yes, we like to tread where others don't. As I mentioned, the family office I work for, they feel they can provide or achieve outsized financial returns, but most importantly, outsized sort of social or human returns in these places. So in Afghanistan, effectively the nation was reborn, if you like, late 2001, early 2002. And both in the telephony space and in the power space, we've had to sort of grow alongside the regulators, grow alongside the infrastructure providers. In the case of power, the utility, the national utility, is the offtake for our power generation plant. It's a very weak institution. And even beyond sort of the capacity of a regulator or government to sort of provide the investment context or investment structure, right? We have a lot of external actors in Afghanistan and some of these other very dynamic countries that give us great pause. But to really answer your question, Ms. Chu, the single biggest problem I have trying to communicate the market opportunity in Afghanistan to someone that's from the outside is that their perception is really, understandably, constrained to what they've read in the newspaper or seen on television. So for them, the mere mention of the word Afghanistan gives rise to bombing, terrorism, violence of a lot of sort. And what I try to convey is that, in that one case, right, it's a country of 35 million people. We have a generation from 2002 to present who have been educated. Yes, there are bad actors, Taliban and ISIS, very, very active. But that's a very small part of the population. Really, at the end of the day, you have a certain number of sort of extreme views, and then you have 34 million people that are just trying to have jobs and create a life for them and their families. And in those cases, they need fundamental services like they need electricity, they need telephony, they need a representative media that's not portraying a particular viewpoint. So the single biggest challenge I have is just to get past this mental block that, my goodness, this place is total chaos, total disaster. I'm not underselling or suggesting it's easy to do business there, but
How do you keep yourself safe?
well, we spend a lot of time actually, making sure that our businesses, our investments are productive for the community, right? So, whether it's our cellular telephony business, where we have 1,400 tower sites spread around the country, each one of those tower sites employs 2 or 3 of the local community members. They all have families, so all of a sudden your tower site is not just a piece of infrastructure providing a cell phone signal, it's actually a livelihood for a family or multiple families. In the power generation case, these are people that have historically seen power lines go over their roofs, over their communities, and not had any electricity. So you can imagine how frustrating that is if you happen to be living in the north where the big power stations have been built or were built during the Soviet time, and at the end of the day you go home and you have no electricity. So our first discussion with the utility is that we have to run transmission lines from our plant to the local community so they see the benefit. And in some cases, and I think Michael made this comment earlier, right? I often sort of say this with some reluctance, like our group is the largest single corporate taxpayer in the nation of Afghanistan. That's not a title which my CFO likes to talk about, but we're actually doing things productively for the nation, not only at an individual level, but at a national level too.
I have a question to the only technology expert on this panel, Dr. Lee. Can you give us a few examples of the most disruptive technology that you think that can come out to the market at the next few years?
Yeah, so I think the consideration of time scale is very important. So I would consider anything that's less than, ready to roll out to the market in less than 2 to 3 years. I consider that short term. In university, we do actually mid to long term research, which is like more like 5 years out or even 10 years out. So if you say the next few years, I think in the commercial industrial realm, I would think watch out for battery energy storage for grid scale, because it's, I think.
Battery storage, can you give us an example of what was the capacity in the past and how much it can be improved in the next few years?
Yeah, the capacity was very small because they were demonstration projects in the past. Because if some technology doesn't make money, then the government support it, and so it wouldn't be exponentially growing. But the electric vehicle industry has sort of been supporting the supply chain for battery cells and packs. And in the last 4 years, so I have looked at the spreadsheet of what's the cost component in a battery cell. And I had a calculator from Porsche Institute from Switzerland 4 years ago. And those numbers are already off by a factor of 2 to 3. So the cost of batteries are coming down quite rapidly, similar to the solar cells. And once it hit that threshold that I mentioned, then you could see a pretty large scale rollout pretty quickly. So I think that's one area.
Ask a question about the battery after it's depleted. How do you recycle it?
Yeah, that's a huge problem. So actually, lithium-ion batteries are so far not very well recycled, unlike lead-acid batteries, which are recycled 99% of the time. And we have to recycle them with a profit.
Is there a technology to do that in a more efficient way other people don't know yet?
Yes. So I've been watching that space for a while, and there are actually processes which has been demonstrated that can make a profit for the nickel, cobalt, manganese type, and sort of can also make a small profit for lithium iron phosphate chemistry. So that is a hugely important area that's very, very key for both resource conservation, because there are not many lithium to go around. It's heavily localized in Chile, and also actually you would run out of cobalt long before you run out of lithium, and cobalt is localized in Congo. So it's very so the current battery technology, I think if it's really go up in scale, we're going to have an even worse problem than oil. So there are also technologies that rely on sodium instead of lithium, which is much more abundant and broadly available. And people are looking at cobalt-free cathode materials. So lots of activities, and but I think the recycling business is one key part of this, because if you can take the already existing lithium-ion batteries and we can recycle them, then you form a closed economy, and that's, I think, is the way to go.
Great. So batteries and the recycling.
And 20 years ago, when I first got into this business, I met a Frenchman who had developed plastics from cottonseed oil that would dissolve into the water after about an hour and cause absolutely no toxic waste. Those technologies are getting more developed, and we've all seen those ads about ocean pollution from plastics and poor birds strangled by plastic. This is a huge area, and I think I have a friend who claims he's got the solution. So I would encourage all of you to look at that as well.
Okay, we have 5 5 minutes left, so I want to take questions from the audience. Can you do any questions? Okay, go ahead.
So this big picture, we're dealing with negative externalities, and having a globe that doesn't absorb too much light is a public good, right? So it comes back to some pretty fundamental issues, and a lot of people just return to the fact that there's a lot of money being made, there's a lot of innovation, but we're not going to solve global carbon without major government signals. So what is your preferred price on carbon, or if you don't prefer carbon tax? I'm not saying this is realistic, but just humans are the way we are.
Sure.
And when innovators like myself work on solar, we're talking about getting to the price of natural gas, not getting 10x better, right? So it's still not that exciting from a profit-making perspective. So how do we solve that fundamental problem?
Okay, so I will give you each of the speaker 1 sentence to finish that question. Okay.
I built in social engineering into our product, so when you use our product, you get a score right away. You know what you've spent and what you save on every device that we use. And we publish that so you can monitor that. All right, that's a start.
Okay.
So everyone has to do their part. So we have YouTube, and we are recording a lot of the interactions here. I think we want to have broader public acceptance of what's going on and support technology, support investment, support carbon tax, basically. That's an awfully difficult proposal. I know we have Yellow Vest in France, but it has to be coupled by other policy initiatives, so it's not a regressive tax on the lower income people. So there has to be a societal engineering. It has to be a social engineering job.
Yeah, it's a very tricky situation. I just say, try to enumerate in most humans will respond if you can give them a value to something, right? So even if your number is not correct, just try to enumerate the impact or the opportunity in some quantified dollar terms. And you can caveat and say, I don't know if this is right, but this is what it could be, or this is what it might save. And then people tend to respond to that. It's really difficult otherwise for people, I find, if you don't give them a metric related in dollars that they can try to relate to.
Sounds kind of obvious, but every day you do the right thing. You do the right thing, and watch what will happen. And if you believe in this guy upstairs, think about that too.
Great, do the right thing. At the last, I'd like to invite all the speakers to stand up here and we take a photo together. And thank for all the audience coming to this panel. If you have any more questions, you're welcome to interact with the speakers. Thank you.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone.